Thank you, Jared. So we're now going to have a look at continuing the little series we're doing on study tools, things that you can use to help you understand the Bible as you read it. So there's a list of a few things on the screen there. We've looked at some of these already. So Mark, I think, did a section on using your margin and cross-references a few weeks ago. We've had a look at concordances and lexicons and computer Bibles and how to use those to understand the Greek and Hebrew words that the original manuscripts used. This evening we're going to have a bit more of a think about maps and atlases and handbooks and how these can be used alongside reading the Bible. And that's an important thing to re-emphasise, that none of these things take the place of reading the Bible. They're just to help you understand the Bible as you read it. So maps then can be very handy to know where events were taking place in the world. Jared's just shown the map of the Roman Empire at the time of the Gospels. There's a map here of the land of Palestine or Israel in the times of the New Testament. And there's some places here, like Jerusalem and Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, and Bethlehem, where he was born. And so it can be useful to get an understanding of where things are taking place, so you can understand the context of what's being said. And sometimes that opens up a bit more meaning and a bit more understanding of the events that go on. There's a map here of Jerusalem as it was in the New Testament. And if you just come with me to John chapter 9, we'll just demonstrate a quick example of how this type of map or atlas can be used to get a bit more understanding of what's going on in the passage. So in John 9, actually the end of John 8 first, so verse 59 of John 8, they took up stones to cast at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. So Jesus is coming out of the temple at this point, which we can see on the map here. The temple is here. And then going then into chapter 9 and verse 1, as Jesus passed by, so as he was coming out of the temple, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. We're not going to go into the story here of what actually happens, but Jesus heals this man of his blindness. And the way he does this, in verse 7, part of the way that this man was healed, he says, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which is by interpretation sent. He went his way therefore and washed and came seeing. It's very easy to just read over that and see, okay, this man went to the pool of Siloam and washed. But when you look at the map of what this man had to do, he was over at the temple here, and the pool of Siloam is shown here. So he had to get from here down the temple steps. He'd have had to come down the temple steps to the pool of Siloam, which was, remember, this man was blind. Now these temple steps were huge blocks of stone, really, which could be hazardous for a blind man. Could fall off the side, or you could get in trouble for falling down these steps. Quite seriously, these were very large steps. So he had to come down these steps to the pool of Siloam just to wash, because a man had told him to, that he might receive his sight. So this, just by looking at a map and understanding what this blind man had to do, we get more of an insight into the faith he must have had in Jesus Christ, that he was able to heal this man's sight, because he went on a hazardous journey for a blind man to follow the commands of Jesus. So that's just one very quick example of using a map or an atlas to get a bit of an understanding of the context of the passage. This is a good atlas to use. This has a series of maps and places that are used throughout the Bible. as does this one from Martin Gilbert. This doesn't just deal with the Atlas of the Bible, but of Jewish history, as it says there, from 2000 BC to the present day. So you can trace the Jews through history and see how prophecies were fulfilled in the places which they ended up in. We can also use Bible handbooks. So people over the decades and centuries have written books about the Bible, about particular passages or books or characters or themes. And we can use these as references to gain a better understanding of what these passages are about, because these people have done the study themselves and have recorded that. And so we can use their work to get a better understanding of the passages. Again, to re-emphasise, not instead of reading the Bible. These books from others, such as this Harmony of Samuel, Kings and Chronicles, these aren't inspired. These are written by man. But they can be useful as reference points to try and enhance our understanding of what we're reading. This is Vine's dictionary of biblical words. I think John Thompson might have mentioned this one a few weeks ago when he was doing his section on concordances. This is beneficial when looking at the Hebrew and Greek words and what they mean, to get a better understanding that way. And like I said, there are handbooks to the Bible. This one, and there are ones like this, that don't necessarily deal with things in the Bible itself, but deal with artifacts maybe that were from the time, with information about what the world was like in particular Bible times. There's pictures there of times from, looks Egyptian. I'm not going to guess what the others are, but there's pictures of and examples of artifacts from particular times, which can again help to get an understanding of the context in which Bible events occur. And this is a particularly good book, I have to say. I meant to bring it with me tonight actually, but I forgot. There's 66 books of the Bible, which again is a handbook to go with the Bible, that gives a summary of each book, so that before maybe you start reading a book or studying it, you can look at this to just get an overview of what it's about, and who it was written by and when it was written and such like. And there are other books like that, more detailed ones on particular Bible passages, but that's a very good one for an overview of the Bible as a whole. And so, coming back to this list then, Bible margin, concordance, lexicon, those have been dealt with in previous weeks. We spoke earlier about other versions of other translations of the Bible, which can be handy to look at maybe a difficult passage that you can't understand, look at how else it's been translated in some of the other versions, which may help you to understand the meaning of the original language. And so a reminder then, I think we've seen this slide before as well, or one like it, tips for approaching reading the Bible. So firstly, you've got to be ready, in a good state of mind, prepared to read the Bible. You've got to allow a good amount of time. 5 minutes isn't enough to get a proper understanding. If 5 minutes is all you've got, then fine. But you really need longer periods of time to really get your head around particular passages. Select a good translation. Like I said, there are some translations out there which aren't so good, which are paraphrases of the original language. So select a good translation and ask for advice on selecting those translations. And then once you're reading, we've spoken previously about Bible echoes. Think about other things you've read in the Bible, whether there are links between passages, echoes of something else you've read. use these study tools that we're talking about, the maps, the atlases, the concordances, the handbooks. Some of them, the handbooks, may point out some Bible echoes which you may not have noticed. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not about what you can discover for yourself necessarily. It's not about man's pride. It's about learning. However, that learning can be done. So seek help. If you're struggling with something, there's no shame in asking for help. Everyone else needs some help as well. If possible, read aloud. It helps to get into the flow, get into the mind of the events, the people that were happening, that were there. And be patient, because the answers don't necessarily come immediately. I've spoken to people studying the Bible for 60 years and they still come across new things, answers to questions they've had for decades. And so yes, be patient, don't expect answers, like I said, within 5 minutes. It takes time. And look for other translations if they may help to understand passages that you're struggling with. So yeah, that's